Well, hello, Neighborhood Church. Welcome to another episode of Pause, a Neighborhood Church podcast. Just a friendly reminder, you can find these all at your favorite podcast locations. If you want to check out other messages, go to neighborhoodc.org. Lots of great information there too. And currently we are in a series on stories of transformation. And I'm joined by Pastor Devin here because yesterday I interviewed a panel of young adults for this continuing stories of transformation. So good morning, Pastor Devin. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Doing well. It is Monday, man, and it is a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Yes, it is. It is. Can't argue with this weather. I mean, all weekend it's been pretty good, and I'm not mad at it. I know summer's coming, but I'm not thinking about that right now.
But summers here are not like Georgia summers, are they? Right?
Well, I don't know. It'll get triple digits.
Okay,
it'll get triple digits. That's around where we're at in Georgia.
So yesterday, thank you for putting together this panel of young adults from the church. It was really great to just hear their different perspectives on life and being part of the church, following Jesus at their age. And yesterday I had mentioned kind of like the generations, and I just wanted to kind of mention afresh again, sort of the different generations. And usually generations in the US, at least, they haven't been studied for a super long time. It's really only started in the early 1900s that they started looking at generational differences. But if you go back, like the generations that are still with us are the silent generation, 1928 to 1945. Then you have the baby boomers. Those are the ones that were coming back from the war, and a lot of women got pregnant. And 1946 to 1964, Generation X, 1965 to 1980. I'm considered a young Gen Xer because I was born in, I'll let out of the bag, 1977. And so I'm a 70s disco child. And then millennials, some say Gen Y, 1981 to 96, then Generation Z, 97 to 12, and then Generation Alpha, 2013 to 2025. So actually in my family, it's interesting because 3 of my kids are Gen Z, and then my youngest is considered Gen Alpha. And so just kind of looking at generations, and we start talking about younger generations, it's kind of, and there's different like factors that go into generations of like why we break them up. But you technically are a millennial or Gen Z, right on the cusp?
One of the old Gen Zers. I'm up there. So I was born in '98, so I'm still born in the 1900s.
Yeah,
right around. And so it's
so
funny.
So good.
Right? It's funny when like I was in middle school, elementary school, high school. We would make fun of the people who were born in like 2000s, like, oh my gosh, you were born
such a baby.
2 years later than me, and now it's the opposite. It's like you were born in like 1990 something. I was like, all right, guys, let's do it. So things have the tables have turned, as they say. But that I think the fact that we have a panel of young people at church who can get up and talk about things from their perspective is amazing. Who, folks who God has blessed with the courage and, I guess what it is, the ability to get up and talk in front of folks, and just that we have all generations who are ready and willing to listen. And so, thank you for giving that stage, that spotlight for young adults just to be heard and listened to. Because it's very easy to say those young folks, they don't know what they're talking about yet. When they get, another 20 years, then they can start saying, but there's some kind of value in that new and fresh perspective.
It's something that struck me yesterday was, and I know this, but just, and I would encourage you to go listen to the message from Sunday, because I think they're going to do a better job than me of explaining it here. But something that struck me as, one of the questions, just kind of paraphrasing it, was like, what is a moment that you really saw Jesus at work in your life? And we went down the line, and every single one of the people on the panel had these specific moments of struggle, of challenge, of how Jesus intervened in like real deep life situations.
Yeah.
And like, I think to your point, sometimes people are like, they don't have that much life experience. They haven't went through pain. They haven't went through difficulties. Give them some time. And I think that was just a powerful reminder of no, like everyone on the panel has gone through things, difficult, challenging things, and seen Jesus meet him in the middle of that.
Yeah. And it just another example of the diversity even amongst generations that, as you were saying, when we went down that line, each one of us had a different story of how Jesus met us, and we all came from different backgrounds. There were folks up there who were PKs, and a guy up there who was a former atheist. There's PK, in case you don't know, pastor's kid. But, I mean, there's folks from all different backgrounds, and we all had the chance of like, oh, this is how I met Jesus, or this is how I made my faith my own. This is we also had someone up there who, entire life was at neighborhood church. Yes. I think it's a blessing, and it's special for someone to have spent so long in the church with a family dedicated, and also be like, I'm ready to pick up that legacy of faith, which is amazing. But I could brag on them all day.
And too, Karina, Karina is the one that talked about being at neighborhood church for her whole lifespan. And I think part of like even her challenge, and she didn't bring it up necessarily yesterday, was like there was a season at neighborhood church that there wasn't a lot of people around her age. And like when you showed up, and when Natalie showed up, and when other people started showing up, like Karina had stuck it out in some ways, like as one of a smaller group of young adults. And then, all of a sudden God started bringing in young adults. And I'm so grateful that she like was willing to remain. And her faithfulness in some ways is being rewarded in so many ways. And part of the rebuilding and blossoming of all the young adults around the church.
And we mentioned it, touched on it lightly yesterday, but our young adults group, she came in, sat down with me and Mark, like, we should start a young adults group. And we're like, let's do it. Amen. You want to learn about Jesus in a different setting. But she also said yesterday that she felt like God has brought in this community like right when she needed it most. Which was like just amazing to hear that not only can we come together as young adults and talk about young adult things, but that there is actual like community supporting each other, walking towards Jesus with each other. Which is, I have a whole rant about how young adults need more community. Is like our number one need right now.
Now's the time. Go.
Well, let me get started here. But I talk about it all the time. And I think the best introduction is everyone up on that stage. We're blessed because they are young adult leaders. Like they lead in our young adults group and help in so many different ways in that ministry. But when we were right at the start of it, we went out for lunch and talked and kind of talked about what we saw for the vision for this. And I asked everyone, we went around the table of like, what is the like number one need? And again, we have a span of different. So me and Karina, like the older, Gen Zers, we're out there, but we had some, Landon just graduated high school at the time, like very entering into young adulthood. And we had Natalie, who's like right in between. So we had the whole span. I was like, so each one of us can talk from a different perspective, even in a young adults thing. And so I was like, so what do you feel like for the people your age? Specifically, what do they need? And around the table, community. Just a place for people to gather and connect. And there you can blame whatever you want to blame for it, right? You can, it can be social media, it can be whatever. But what is clear is that young adults right now feel isolated. They feel like they're not having those deep forming connections. And time again, when I'm talking to people, they just wish they had community. They're like, well, there's a community of Jesus followers right here who are ready to welcome you. And we talked about this as well a little bit, that I think that's the number one evangelistic effort for the younger generation. It's not going to just be street preaching, but it's someone who understands that they've built a relationship with someone who genuinely loves and cares about them. And that person also loves Jesus. And so they want to know, well, what's this Jesus guy all about?
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to, kind of dig a little bit deeper into this area of community, because I think the word community is pretty broad, but how would you like maybe parallel the difference between, like, say you're talking about followers of Jesus. So let's just label it like Christian community, a young adult Christian community, and just like community, like of young adults. Like, is there something different, or like, and trying to just think sort of out loud here of, couldn't somebody just find community at a board game night? Yeah. Or like, is there something unique to Christian community that provides something different for young adults?
Yeah. I call it like the open arms effect, and don't get me wrong, not every single Christian community does as well. And I know there's people who've been burned by certain Christian communities, but I think for me, in all the Christian communities I've been a part of, you can tell there's something different, and these people are welcoming. These people don't hold random grudges against you of like, oh, okay, he didn't do that right, or didn't do that. And some of the board game areas here, this is just rumor, I don't know, but I heard, if you play the board game wrong, or you didn't have that rule, then like, no, that's it, you're done, You're out. But I say that jokingly, but
not dropping any names.
Yeah. But I think right now we live in a very polarized society. There was just this morning I was looking at this study that talks about political trends among men and women in Gen Z worldwide has grown, like the political divide between men and women amongst Gen Z, except for in England. For some reason, England, they're going the same direction. But in every single other country, it's like a huge divide that's grown from different generations. And so we're living in a time where we know, like, oh, if I say this or believe this, then I know that person's going to cut me off, never talk to me again. That person's never going to talk to me again. But there's something about, as a Christian, I want to show you love, even if you don't agree with me or you don't have the exact same views. Just that sense of like, community doesn't mean that I have to be exactly the way you want me to be. To have a relationship,
Yeah. I know why England is closer together than other ones. It's the pub. And I'm not even kidding about that. Like, so I lived in England for a few years, but the pub in general, like, I think it's kind of trendy in America. We're going to go to the pub, but really pub is short for public house. And that was like the community place. And there's still that sense of community. I remember Nami and I just went to Ireland like a little over a year ago. And I'm like, man, I want to find not like the trendy pub. I want to find like one of the pubs. And so found this place, rated super high, walked in. Everybody in there was like over the age of like 75. But you can tell, like, they showed up there after work. Everyone knew everyone related to one another. Like, there was a sense of community there. And I think there's something like in that, like, and even when I lived in England, there was like the pub that I would go to with people, and it wasn't necessarily about drinking. It was about being together. It was about socializing. It was about having those conversations and building community, kind of around the table and in an unstructured environment that we're like, we can have differences, but we can talk it out. So that's my no data based off that, but like, I think, like really like even live it. I think it was 2 years ago we visited England, with our family too. And I hung out with some people that I knew, and hey, where'd I meet him? I met him at the pub. Like, let's take the family out to the pub. Let's interact there. So I think there is something what you're talking about, that like public discourse, being in community, that we aren't labeling people like, oh, you're all this or you're all that. Like, we can have civilized disagreements and conversations and not have to stereotype.
Yeah. And, I mean, you mentioned in the pub reminded me of the old Cheers themes. Like, sometimes you want to go
where everyone knows your name.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's something to having that place of community of like, man, these folks. And that was one thing I mentioned on stage Saturday.
We aren't planning on opening a pub, just like not yet. Not yet. This is
we'll get in trouble. We can't joke like that. Something I mentioned on stage Sunday. I was at a farmer's market talking to a woman who wasn't a believer, and she was saying like, oh yeah, and I was saying like, there's something about being a part of a faith community where people will come alongside you and help you in your time of need. And like that's one of the things I love about being integrated in a faith community. And she was saying, yeah, I don't see that. Like when she's like, yeah, I know this person who got sick and no one was there for them, and no one. And I'm like, yeah, that's at our church. When someone's sick, we have meal trains. We have folks who come out the woodwork who try to help support in all different kinds of ways. And I'm like, I could list all the things of. I haven't been deathly sick at the church or anything like that, but I've had car troubles, and boom, someone's like, all right, borrow this car until yours gets fixed. You know, all these different things of like community, and we're talking about like the community of having that sense of belonging, but there's also this aspect of community of coming together to make for the better whole. Again, community is that's my drum that I beat right now.
And I agree. And even some of the things that like we're doing as a church, like for example, and you probably say the same thing on some level, like when we do neighborhood groups, we assess those neighborhood groups. And the more you participate in community, the more connected you feel, the more you're cared for, the more there's a mutual beneficial relationship. And so sometimes I think there is this weird dynamic, like somebody's like, well, I really don't experience community at that church. Well, when was the last time you showed up? When was the last time you volunteered? When was the last time like you really leaned into that? Like for example, like triads this summer, gentlemen, don't have any signups yet, you know, but like, when was it that you like said, I'm going to step into community? And then it becomes mutually beneficial, because sometimes I think it's not like this ethereal thing. Like it takes effort. Like I'm going to carve out that time to show up at the young adults thing. I'm going to carve up that time to volunteer. I'm going to carve out that time to really lean in. And even when we talk about care, you know, I'm part of the benevolence team and an advisor to the benevolence team. And part of it is like, when I look at who we care for, when people call here, one of the first questions I ask them is, are you connected with a faith community? And because a lot of times, like, we want to care for people in our community, but if you're not connected, it's really hard. Like, we don't know you. You know, like you literally could just be showing up, you know, whatever, for whatever reason. But if I see you on Sundays, if you're in a neighborhood group, if you're involved in different ways, and then you come to me with a need, we're like, yeah, we know you. We've gotten to understand you. And so we want to care for you in a deeper way. And so we have this kind of general thing, like, with the market, with other things, with supporting Montgomery County Coalition of the Homeless. Like, we want to care broadly, but like really deep community is like this mutual commitment, you know, of saying like, man, I'm going to lean in, and I'm going to keep leaning in, even in the weird and difficult and, you know, challenging times.
And I think what you mentioned that is so good is like, once you know someone in that mutual loving community, then you can care deeper for them. And you know, we talk about ways of caring for people, ways to get to know people, and this is how Jesus you know, goes in, but it's very hard to care for someone who you just know nothing about. You could just try to throw things out that will help the situation, but like you're saying, when you lean into community, then people can genuinely get to know you, get to know your situation, get to know everything about you, and come alongside you better.
We talked a little bit about cross-generational things happening. And, you know, so like this kind of mutual beneficial, once again, we're talking about community, and it's not just young adults in the church. So one of the questions I was asked yesterday was like, how maybe are different, or even the younger generation, misunderstood or misrepresented in the church? Do you want to like kind of revisit some of that, or even like on the positive sign, like how can the generation sort of how can we become more of like a cross-generational body of Christ? You know, kind of go either way.
I think on the first half, Pastor Natalie said a great word on Sunday when she talked about this generation is not looking for more entertainment. That we've been we've been I don't know, in a sea of entertainment. We can get that from our phones. And I think that sometimes that is automatically the go-to of like, how are you going to capture the attention of the young adults? Well, you need fog machines and bigger lights, and no, you don't like this. We can go see that at any point in time we ever want. But there's something about authentic relationships that drives this generation. And again, it goes back to what we were saying of being raised in the social media age, that when we see authentic relationship, we see people living authentic lives towards Jesus. That's something that we crave. Like, okay, they're not just saying, man, it's great to serve the poor. No, they're like actually going out and serving the poor as well. They're not just saying, man, we want to be a blessing to our community. No, there's a farmer's market. Like we're trying to bless the community in what we do, and that's something that this generation will constantly, I think, always crave and look out for. And anything was, because I'm about to jump to the second part now.
So I think that is so key, that there is so much hypocrisy, and I have to check my own soul, my own life, and how I'm living out this faith. There's an old song, I think it's by Matt Redman, called "Now to Live the Life." And it's like one of these kind of reflective songs. And I dated myself too with that. But like, and he kind of goes through like, many are the words we say, many are the prayers we pray, many are all these things we kind of project, but now to live the life, now to live the life. And for me, I want to be an example of faith to the younger generations, especially, that they look at me and go like, Mark's not perfect. He makes mistakes. But like, he's truly passionately wanting to follow Jesus. That's the overarching curve of his life. So I think that's a really good word and reminder too, as we're like kind of looking at this cross-generational thing. Like for me, I truly want to be an example to younger generations.
And that was where I was thinking of going, like in the second part of saying, what does cross-generational relationships look like? I think you mentioned on Sunday, we have the perfect model in Paul and Timothy, that it looks like coming alongside and pouring in and mentoring someone who's a little bit younger in the faith, or actually physically younger than you are. Everyone on that stage can point out to a person who like, oh no, this person poured into me, poured into the faith, and that's why I'm the Christian that I am now. That's why I'm at the point I am now. For me, what's the word? Someone who was so monumental in pouring into me, and where I'm at now is Dr. Heising at Toccoa Falls College. He's the pastoral major professor there. But I talk about it all the time. But like, just spend time really pouring into each part of my life, and he helped teach me how to preach, all that. But like, deeper than that, like help with the Christian walk of walking alongside. That's where we should be like trying to figure out, how can we see more and more mentorship in our Christian spaces, of saying, no, the older folks shouldn't just hang out with older folks. No. The older folks should like, I'm going to intentionally go out, be talking, having conversations with younger folks. But there's also coming in as an older person, coming into that relationship with humility of like, maybe that younger person could also teach me something in that relationship. And I think I'm stealing this from you. I'm not sure, but just a mutually beneficial relationship in that.
There's different books, kind of with this idea in mind too, of like leading up or reverse mentoring. And I know, like, I'm way out of the young adult range now. I like to pretend that I'm still young, and maybe on the inside I feel it a little bit. But I think, like, as I've tracked through my own life, I've always appreciated when people who are like farther in the journey, or who even I'd look up to and be like, man, that's an example of faith. That when I interact with them, if it doesn't feel like they're looking down on me, You know, if they come in with this idea of like, man, this is a mutual relationship. Like, yeah, I'm farther on the journey, but like, I'm not saying I'm better than you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm more intelligent than you. I'm not saying that this is a one-way street. That makes such the difference. And, you know, like I mentioned on Sunday, I have one of my coaches, I think he told me the other day, is 83 years old. And I meet with him kind of every 6 weeks, and I have some other people in my life, but yeah, another one of the people is like in their 70s. I think the other person is like in their 60s, all people who have faithfully served Jesus for long times and pretty significant roles and capacities. But when I meet with them, there's never like this like weird, like, man, you know, someday you're going to get there, Mark. But it's really like, no, I want to share with you. I want to pour into you. If you have questions, if you're stuck, like, I want to just help you. And I think, you know, that posture and hopefully that's the posture that I'm taking with people. Like, it's always hard to know how you're being received, but I want whatever person to feel comfortable to come to me, and that I'm not like looking down on them and not kind of being like, oh, you know, when you grow up, you know, type deal, and sort of pandering. But for me, like, I want to have that posture. And I know when that posture has been taken with me, that's been so helpful.
I would say you definitely have that posture. I have never felt like you know, in a couple years when you know something. But I think that's something remarkable, and we've talked about that before, of like of coming here and how important for me it was to have a good start in ministry. And I thank you for that. And that was part of it, of like, where am I going to be poured into without being condescended to, you know, which, you know, is interesting. But I also love the fact that you pointed out that you can have multiple mentors, and to try and work yourself into being that place. Because vocationally where I'm at, I hit the lotto, you know. I got you, Eric. I got the church planning director. I got you know, a bunch of folks who are like contractually obligated to pour into me. But
that's why we all do it, Devin. That's really why you finally found out.
I'm a hard guy to mentor. They have to do it. No, but like I think. I say all that to say, like, it might be more difficult for other people because they might have to have a conversation like, hey, go and seek them out. Will you mentor me? I know there's people in the young adults group who like, okay, hey, I think this person's a good mentor. How do I have that conversation of can I? And I'm like, well, if you believe they are a good, godly person, and you believe they have time, I don't think that their answer is ever going to be no. You know, that, and that you, go out and seek that person to mentor, and don't just seek one. It can be multiple people pouring into you in different spaces.
And I mentioned this yesterday. I kind of have this idea of coaching, mentoring, that you need somebody that's like farther along the journey with you. You need somebody to walk side by side with you. You need somebody downstream, that you have kind of these different people that you're looking at. And I think one reason is, I think that's how great model, like you see it in scripture, like, you know, Paul mentored Timothy. Timothy clearly invested in the church in Ephesus and the leaders there. And he's even encouraged, you know, like teach what I've taught to faithful men who will teach it to faithful men who will pass it on to multiple generations. And so I think there is this idea of like, whatever I've received, it's not just for me, it's to give away. But if I'm receiving upstream and I'm learning from people who have gone farther than me, like that, now I'm more even equipped at what I'm trying to do. And now I'm even more equipped to give things to other people. And so I love this idea of like, mentoring is not just for me. Like, it doesn't end with me. The goal isn't that like one day I'm like, wow, I have it all figured out. No, like the goal is for me to become even more healthy and effective and a deeper follower of Jesus, that like when I'm with other people, it actually is more beneficial to them than it would be for out. So I think, you know, all of those, like, and I think, you know, there is the cross-generational piece, but I think it's also maybe even a maturity piece. That there might be somebody that God brings in my life that's older than me, but is younger in the faith. And so sometimes it even is a little bit different. Like, man, you have a lot of life experience, but your understanding of what it means to follow Jesus is just younger. And so how can we encourage you on in the faith too?
That's good.
That's great. Another thing that we kind of tackled too yesterday, I'm just trying to recall, was just looking at sort of like the future of the church and thinking about younger generations, how they're experiencing the church, how they're participating in the church, and then kind of like, is there hope for the future? Because the narrative in the media is kind of gloom and doom, and the world is falling apart, and that's the media, and I think that will always be the negative narrative in the media. But like when you look at like say younger generations and living this out and leading a young adults group. At your house and doing a lot in this space, like what would you say like the future looks like in your mind? So one of the things that give me hope for the next generation of church is, and we've touched on it, is just this focus on relationship and authenticity. I think I truly think that as the next generation continues and develops, like that's just going to take more and more precedence in the church of like, we want to focus on relationship because that's what matters to us. And that gives me a lot of hope because I think that's what matters to Jesus. It's like building and connecting these relationships. And for me personally, another thing is just radical obedience. Like I think you see in this younger generation, I think you can count me in as part of it, of like once they're touched by Jesus, once we're touched by Jesus, then all of a sudden just whatever God asks, no matter how crazy it is, and when I go into my testimony, I'm like, oh yeah, I was an atheist, and then God called me to faith and then to be a preacher, and so I left my college and went to a different one. And I remember like I had a conversation with my father not too long ago, and he was like, yeah, that was like crazy. He was like, I can't stop you, like if that's what God's, but he's like, man, it's such a radical switch and radical obedience, and the people up on the stage, because I get to do ministry with them, I constantly see how they are being radically obedient to the Lord, to whatever thing that He's calling them to. And I'm even seeing, like Karina mentioned, some of that is just going outside their comfort zones of like doing things that they just would not normally do. Karina mentioned that as an introvert, being on that stage was not something she would normally do, but radical obedience of like, she prayed on, like God was like, yeah, do it. And it's done. And so, that's what I see for the future of the church. Authentic relationships and radical obedience to Jesus. And I can't think of anything that would be more hopeful than that. That's so good. I as I get older, I have to be reminded of that. It's easy to go towards security and safety and stability, and radical obedience can challenge that. I think, how old was Abraham, when he was called out? Wasn't he like 80, I want to say?
Yeah.
If I recall right, I'm like trying not to get him confused, but I think it was 80 when God was like, you leave the land that you've been living in your whole life and go to a place that like you didn't even know exactly where you're going. And like I want to be that 80-year-old that like if God is telling me and laying out enough that I trust the voice of God and I step out into that. And I think about like what you're talking about. And I remember when God spoke to me certain things too, like even coming here to Maryland was picking up roots in the Midwest. In many ways it was comfortable. And, I remember coming in and the district superintendent at that time was like, you have 3 years. And if something doesn't significantly change in this church, it's probably not going to be around. And so I came out here with, like a 3-year window, but it was also like, this is not like I'm moving into a position of complete stability and like everything's going to work out. And I came out here with an attitude of like, let's see how it goes. In 3 years we can figure it out. If this isn't working out or God had a different plan, so be it. And I think like, that radical obedience at times does challenge our safety, our security, our foundations. Like, what are we really willing to do? And like even the words of Jesus when he tells the rich young ruler, give everything to the poor and come follow me. And we love to explain that away. Like, that's not for everyone because of this and that, but to just like sit with that and be like, if Jesus told me to give up everything and come follow him, would I really do that?
Yeah.
Would I really do that? Or would I just kind of be like, well, Jesus, did he really say that? Mm-hmm. You know, and I know that radical obedience is the best way, but in practicality, it is hard.
Yeah,
it is hard.
Yeah. And I know we're getting long here, but you just mentioned, I don't know if I ever told you the story of me coming into church planting, but I'll tell the quick version here. Yeah. But it was exactly that. I felt like God was calling me to church planting. I had a job in Nashville that I wanted to go to already, and I went to church one Sunday morning, and the sermon was on church planting. But he didn't go to Acts. He didn't go to, any other usual church planting sermon things. He went to the rich young ruler. That's where he preached from. And he looked out in the crowd and said, can you imagine loving anything so much that you would tell Jesus no and walk away? And the people next to me also knew that I was going through this church planting thing, and they are hitting my leg. They're like, "Oh my gosh, can you imagine like God talking to you directly, you in the sermon?" I was like, "All right." And so the next day, I called up the church in Nashville. I was like, "All right, I'm not coming." Yeah. But that was like a radical obedience moment. So and
and I've had those moments when you know that God is speaking, that it's not even like a question. And I think, at least for me, in those moments, I have said yes. Yeah. You know, sometimes it's like, is this really God? But like when it's like that blunt, you're like, I got to do it. Yeah. I got to do it. I got to go. And thank you so much, Pastor Devin, for just inviting us to this conversation and continuing conversation. Any final words as we wrap up?
Yeah, I'm excited for what the church in this new generation will be, but I'm also so excited that we don't have to go it alone, that we have past generations to pour down wisdom and to continue in the work of ministry as we are getting foot and rising up. And so I'm thankful for being able to be in a church where we have multiple generations working together just to accomplish the will of God.
That's so good. That's good. Thank you, Pastor Devin. And thanks for joining us on another episode of Pause. We'll be back next week with an episode on widows and widowers in the church. So that you can join us on Sunday for another panel conversation about that. You can check out everything at neighborhoodc.org. Lots of great stuff going on there. And I'll put in a plug. If you're into church planting or considering it, talk to Devin. And also, Farmers Market is underway. So if you're in the area and want to volunteer, simple way to show and share Jesus, get signed up at neighborhoodc.org. God bless.